Hi! Welcome to Fireside Snack. Let's grab a snack and sit down to chat. We're Abby and Gabby, two recovery coaches eager to share our lived and professional experience in the world of mental health and eating disorders. In our time together, we hope to grab a bite to eat and connect with ourselves and each other. Our hope with this podcast is to inspire you to take care of yourself by building a life you don't want to run away from. As a disclaimer, the information shared in this podcast is based on the personal experiences of Abby and Gabby and is intended for informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are seeking support or have concerns about your mental health, please consult with a licensed professional. Enjoy your fireside snack. Hi everyone, welcome to Fireside Snack. My name is Gabby and I am joined by my co-host Abby, and we are two recovery coaches. We have lived experience with eating disorders and mental health, and we've also worked in the field. And today we have a very special episode because we are going to be answering the second half of your guys' audience questions. But before we get too deep into that, we are called Fireside Snack for a reason, Abby. So what do we have for a snack?
We are enjoying a cheese stick of the mozzarella variety and some water.
Exciting. Heck yeah!
Gabby, what do you have?
My partner just came back from the store and I've never tried this before, Brew Doctor Kombucha Crisp Apple. So I'm going to try that, do a little reveal. Here we go. It tastes like apple.
I could not tell where you were going with that facial reaction.
It tastes like apple, and then I've also got some cashews with me. Cashews beside me. It's riveting stuff over here.
Well, I'm excited about this. Our last Q&A, I had so much fun doing. Before even the second part, we love getting to answer questions that you all have and just share a little bit more of detailed stuff that you might not get in episodes. And speaking of episodes, we have a question that I think ties in perfectly to kick us off. Gabby, I'm fascinated to hear your response. How do you guys decide what topics to talk about each week?
That's a great question. Well, I would say that we decide what topics to talk about. Abby and I typically, before we start every episode, we do a check-in of how we're doing as individuals and then things that we want to do with the podcast. And then afterwards, we go through we have like a potential topics list that we're constantly working off of, and we're constantly adding new things to. So like if we get off an episode and we're like, hey, that would be an interesting thing to talk about, we'll typically add it to our list. But we'll typically decide after we record an episode what we're going to talk about the following week. Do you have anything to add to that, Abby?
No, I think that's spot on. We usually do like somewhat of an outline to go through our thoughts on each of the topics and then combine them before jumping into an episode. Importantly, shameless plug, when you suggest a topic, we can also turn that into an episode. So as you're listening, not only Q&A type questions can you send to us, but suggestions for episode topics. We're all ears, but a lot of it comes from our master list of ideas for episodes. That's a good question.
I would say, too, we do have like an outline, and it's the same outline for every episode, unless we have a guest on, which we've had a couple times, and unless we're doing like a Q&A or something along those lines. Okay. Our next question is actually kind of posed to you, Abby, which I'm very excited about. This one's a 3-parter, so I'll break it down. We'll do each question along the way. So What does it look like to start doing research in the eating disorder field?
That's a great question. I only can speak from my experience. I don't know many people that have done research related to eating disorders. So for me, I had to get started with general research experience, like researching how to research has been a big part of my learning, just how to engage in the process to then get to a point where I could do something that I'm passionate about, like eating disorders. So my way of starting was by jumping into meaningful projects that didn't relate to this field until I gained enough experience to start a project like the one I did for my thesis on my own.
I'm curious based on that question, because I think this was something I was wondering about your research. And this goes on to the next part of this question. So the next question of this little bundle is, how do you get funding? But I'm also curious, How did you find a mentor that was willing to be passionate about your eating disorder project?
Fantastic questions and similar. So, the university that I attend has some great resources for students to do their own research projects. So, they have something called the Undergraduate Research Creative Activities Fund, IRCA for short, that I applied to and was able to get monetary compensation to pay participants to take part in the study. Not every study needs funding. I will say that's important. I needed funding because I wanted people that took part in my survey to get paid for it, but I could have also just sent out the survey. People have been interested and responded, and there been no funding involved. So funding is talked about a lot in research, but especially for smaller projects, it's not a requirement and shouldn't hold anybody back. But yeah, fun fact. As for my supervisor, I've just been very, very fortunate. I started out and have been with one mentor since my very first research experience ever, and then stepped into research with the director of undergraduate research at my university, who has just been above and beyond wonderful, supportive. I've done research with her and her own projects for like a year and a half, and I trusted her to just provide me with great mentorship when I jumped into my own project and went from there. So I had that pre-existing relationship with her that ended up being very helpful.
That's so cool. It's so cool that you're working with a director and that you just did your final presentation. This is the final piece of this question, and then we'll both answer the questions, Abby. What are the outcome objectives typically associated with this kind of research?
Yeah, I touched on a little bit. I do a lot of presentations. So presented this research several times in different formats. I've gone to conferences where I have a giant poster with all my lovely data that I get to talk about. I've done oral presentations, which is like a slide presentation. And what I just finished is a paper. It's called a manuscript. It's a little bit heftier than a standard paper. It's 30 pages. Mine, they can be above or below that. And it just is a really in-depth analysis of what is current research on the topic that you're doing. How did you do your research and what did you find? For me personally, my goal is to publish this. I don't want this to stay in one area. I can push the scope of the research out farther. So there's a lot of different ways to do things with your research. For me, that's primarily looked like presenting at conferences, giving oral presentations, and writing a manuscript.
Knocking it out of the park, Abby.
Well, that was a lot of me talking. Let's jump into another question. And Gabby, I'm excited to pick your brain. And there are some really solid questions that we have here. The one that I want to jump into first is, what beliefs about yourself did you have to unlearn during recovery?
I mean, there was a lot. And I think we've talked about this before. I think I had an entire blueprint for life that was just not conducive for me living a happy and successful life. And so a big one was that there's no one way to have a body. There's no one way to exist. There's not just one particular ideal body type. I think recognizing that my body is what it is and growing some acceptance around the way that I look, as opposed to trying to fight the way that I look and think I need to fit into a specific box, is one thing. I would also say the belief that there was something like, which I think this is a very common belief of anybody who has trauma, is like this belief that deep down, if people actually got to know me, they would see that I'm the worst person that they've ever met, and that I'm awful, and that I'm truly bad intentioned or dramatic or this, that, and the other. I think a lot of beliefs around who I thought I was supposed to be, or what I was supposed to do to fit into like the mold of society, like be quieter, be smaller, be this, be that, really having to push up against those beliefs. What about you, Abby?
This is a solid question. I very much agree with having to unlearn that there's something inherently wrong with me. That's something I've found some like grounding on, but took me a long time. I would say I also had to unlearn that I was helpless. I've talked a little bit about my treatment dependence, and I thought I was just the lost cause, so why try? was a really big barrier to me engaging in recovery in a meaningful way because I just thought it was too late, too far gone. So I had to unlearn that in order to believe that I have the autonomy and like ability to do what I need to do for myself. And then I think my last one was that I was going to always be a victim. And I've had a fantastic therapist in my first treatment center who really broke it down to me is that these stages of living that I could be in, I can be a victim, which is something happened, right? So I'm not saying victim as in things happen that aren't your fault. That's like labeled as a victim. This is a little bit different, like living in a victim mindset. I could live as a survivor, or I could live as a thriver and really like unashamed, take ownership of my life, take ownership for my experiences, not let it hinder me, really grow from it. And I thought I was never going to get out of the victim stage of mindset, and I was able to do that. But yeah, it really changed my whole experience after that. The more I think about this question, there are just so many little pieces that slid back and forth. It almost reminds me of like there's the games where there's a whole bunch of pegs on the wall and you can drop the ball. And it just kind of, there's a lot of that made me unlearn. Very complicated, but it just took time.
This was one that, as you were talking, it got me thinking about it, because I feel like a lot of these beliefs we've hit on in the podcast, in previous episodes talking about other topics. I feel like one that we haven't necessarily talked about that's kind of a different take on what you were saying is that I always thought that life was happening to me. And so I think that's a different way to frame the victim mentality. I remember I would walk through life and be like, why is everything so hard for me? Or why is life actively working against me? Or I've been such a nice person. Why do these things continue to happen to me? Thinking that life is in control and I'm just on the sidelines. The storyline is happening to me instead of I write my own storyline. I think that was a big thing for me to differentiate, because the things that happen to me in life aren't necessarily always a result of the consequences of my actions. We were talking earlier, Abby, like my car got scratched. That doesn't have some cosmic meaning. This is not like some karmic reckoning for me being, maybe not nice when I could have been nicer. Sometimes bad things just happen, and it doesn't have to have any impact on you or your worth or who you are as a person. It's just hard things happen, and we have to figure out how to deal with them. So I think that was another one that I wanted to touch on, because I feel like the ones that I shared, I was like, I've talked about that a little bit. But I think maybe being passive in your own life.
I really like that. I was struggling with the word victim, trying to find like a better way to describe it. I think what came to mind for me was the locus of control. It's like what you were saying. I can't, like, life just happens to me is an external locus of control. I failed the test because the test was too hard. Versus an internal locus of control. I failed the test because I stayed up late all night watching my new favorite TV show and didn't get good sleep. And that's a very simple way to put it, but it's the idea that I have some choice in what happens in my life, that internal locus, versus the external being like, it happens and I'm here to suffer through it.
I love that you talked about that, Abby, because it was not only impactful for my recovery, but also for all of my relationships as well. That ability to finally be able to take accountability for like, hey, maybe it's not that the test was too hard. Maybe it's that I didn't study. And like having that mindset shift, because I think prior to that, whenever I would be in relationships, friendships, whatever, where I would do something wrong, when someone would bring something to me and be like, man, you hurt my feelings, I'd be like, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. And get very defensive around what my intention was around something, instead of recognizing, even though I wasn't intentionally trying to do something, I left an impact that wasn't what I wanted. And I care enough about this person to be able to take ownership of that. Whereas before, my shame was so strong that I didn't want to touch any accountability for anything, because it just reiterated negative beliefs about myself.
Such a good point.
Okay, next question that we've got here. So, what are your boundaries now when it comes to conversations about diet, body, or health? This is a good one.
This is so good. Pretty open about my experiences and I like with an eating disorder, and I think that helps me communicate my boundaries. I started at a gym because I like moving my body, and I'm working with a personal trainer to make sure I've had some like former injuries that I wanted to respect. And I said first day, I'm in recovery from an eating disorder. We're not going to do this to talk about weight loss. We're not going to talk about like body shape. I'm here to feel stronger and like feel good in my body. And that's that. So pretty upfront, I'm going to just say it out loud. And usually people respect that. At doctor's offices, I am very also firm. I think what allows me to do that is to know that I am the expert of myself. I know my history and I know that BMI is flawed and I can set these boundaries and it be okay. But this took us like so much growth. Boundaries in general were hard, and then doing something that was against the mainstream to set boundaries in conversation with physicians was, I mean, it was terrifying. What did that look like for you?
I think it's important to note that Abby and I's responses might look a little bit different to the everyday average bear because we've worked in the field. And so we also know how clinicians and therapists and dietitians will sometimes approach these topics in a not trauma informed way. And so I feel like we have the ability to know how to advocate for what we deserve and what we want, but we also know how the systems work and what we can get out of them. And so I think our responses are probably pretty like top tier of this is what it would look like to be an eating disorder advocate for yourself. I would say that yeah, doctor's offices, any kind of professional practice, I'm very open with being like, this is where I'm at. This is what I've gone through. I think also because I've been in recovery for so long, this is something that isn't a hot button topic. I feel pretty okay just being like, this is what it is. I definitely think this has been tricky, though, as I've gotten older and realizing that just because I work in this field doesn't mean that everybody's aware of this stuff in the same way. So I'm thinking about, in particular, when I was younger, I remember one of my first jobs. It was an office job. I was working in a cubicle. We were on teams. And I remember one of the things that we did come springtime was a weight loss competition. And I remember being like, this must be some kind of joke. Like, I can't believe we're still it felt like I was in that episode of The Office.
Yeah.
Where everybody goes to these extremes to like, get vacation days and stuff. That's what it felt like at our office. And I remember I sent an email to HR and I was like, hey, now my whole office is talking about dieting and restricting, and I'm literally in recovery. And I was just recently in recovery too. I was walking like a very tight line of it. And I sent this email and I talked to people around me and everybody else was like, yeah, this is also really weird and stupid. And then they sent emails. And so that was an instance where I was like, wow, people really gathered around me and everybody felt similarly to me. But I've definitely had times where I've been at a party or been around a group of people and they make fat phobic comments or body image comments and I say something and I'm definitely the squeaky wheel in the room that's like, Gabby, come on, I thought we were all just having fun here. And it's like, we can have fun in different ways. Being okay to have people not like you because you're protecting your own peace is okay. And I think that was a very difficult thing for me to wrap my head around, of being like, well, now everybody's going to think I'm such a vibe killer, but I'm not having a good time. So yeah, I'll totally be the wet blanket here.
Something that has brought so much power into my life is knowing how I feel strongest setting boundaries. Because I am typically not good at standing firm. If I say what I said to my trainer and I got pushback, I'm not usually the person to be like, well, then no. I instead lean into, I have a lot of awkward qualities that I feel very just proud of in myself and quirky. And to lean into, like, I can be awkward about it. So while I might not be the kind of person that feels feisty, like I'm going to fight, let's be awkward. Let's like break it down of like, oh, what do you mean? Like, let's do satire. Let's make them explain things. So I have found a way to set boundaries where I can truly communicate it. And if I get pushed back, I've found a way to support myself in those boundaries that's true to me and that I feel able to do, because I used to wait in the past for the right way. I was looking for the right words, the right way to like not make the situation more tense, but also still hold my ground. And now I'm like, okay, let's just be awkward. Like, this is going to be awkward because you just said no and I just said yes. And now we get to be awkward, but I'm comfortable in that. So I don't know how much I've heard of that. Gabby, you probably have a way that you found to feel most comfortable in boundaries as well. But finding that for myself was important.
I remember when I first started coaching, something that somebody said to me has really stuck with me. And it sticks with me when I set boundaries in my personal life, but it sticks with me when I set them in a professional capacity as well. As you're always going to regret not saying something more than you will regret saying it clunkily. It's much better to just say the thing and get it out there than to either live with the resentment of not saying it or the what if of what could have happened. Yeah. And so that's typically how I operate. I will say something even if it's really uncomfortable. I am somebody who's pretty funny and bring a lot of humor into my work, and so I definitely use the satire approach. But I think for me, I just try and remember that it's not my job to make somebody okay with the boundaries that I set.
Yeah.
And it's one thing if I was setting like very bananas boundaries, like you can only call me between 5:55 and 5:57 every day, and if you call me at 5:58, I'm not answering. Like, that's not the kind of boundaries I'm setting. My boundaries are more so like, hey, I won't always have my phone on me, and so if you need me, call me twice. If it's an emergency, call me twice, so I know it's an emergent, like these are different boundaries that I set, not arbitrary ones either. So I think one, it can also help too to understand the intention behind the boundary that you're setting. Why are we setting this? Because then if somebody does have pushback on it, you're able to explain to them the why behind it. So
yeah, I like that a lot. That's good.
Not perfect. It's not perfect, but it is what it is, and we're here doing it.
So I think this is similar, a little different. Our next question is, how do you protect your recovery in environments that are weight or food focused?
This kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. Abby being at the gym, me being at like a weight loss competition at work. There are some situations where you can't just excuse yourself and say, I'll be back. Even though Abby and I are big fans of breaks. We love taking breaks, bathroom breaks, snack breaks, whatever you need to do to get out of there. But sometimes that's not always an option. So what do we do?
I know for me, realize that what I'm doing is protecting my recovery. And I have fought so hard for my recovery that I'll be darned if I let something I know is wrong start to sabotage that. So for me, I protect my recovery by realizing what the value of the thing I am protecting. I'm not just protecting like this 2 hours on Saturday morning that I want to have off instead of showing up to this event. I'm not showing up to this event because it's directly harmful to like my recovery for who I am. And I think doctors' offices, for me, being someone in a larger body, have been environments that are very weight focused, I think, for anyone with any body size, but something that I always knew a conversation was going to be had. And I have a lot of discomfort with like unbalances of authority, feeling like this doctor is in like a position of authority over me. So how could I say something? But I'm protecting something valuable here. I'm protecting my recovery. It's worth the discomfort of saying something, for sticking to my guns, for doing what I need to do because this is valuable. So for me, that's really been the bottom line of kind of what's helpful in those environments. But Gabby, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
It's also important to recognize that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the correct voice. I think just because people are talking a lot about something or sharing a lot about something doesn't mean it's right, which is unfortunate because sometimes we think that because somebody is saying something super loud that it means more than somebody who's maybe saying it quieter. But I think really taking that away, weight obsessed, food obsessed areas of life. I mean, to Abby's point, again, like removing yourself, not being in those situations. We've talked about our holidays in recovery episode is a great one to go back and listen to. If you know you're going into those environments, take steps to prevent, potential triggers that come up, right? We joked around about making a bingo card for everything that people say where you're like, wow, that's bananas, check off the list, So I think those are really good things to do. I also think if you are comfortable or feel okay with it, I think it's also okay to say, hey, everybody in this office is talking about, X fad diet. I don't really want to talk about this anymore. Can we please switch the conversation? Can we talk about something else? And if people are like, you want to switch the conversation, but we're having such a great talk. Okay, bye. I think it's okay to be like, if people don't take to your pivot, then I think it's okay to excuse yourself. Yeah, I would just say those environments are not places you want to be. I don't know how helpful this is to other people, but I have really big sensory issues. I get very overstimulated by a lot of people talking, a lot of people being around me. And so I always carry earplugs as well. Like if I'm going to the store or if I'm going to a concert, I think doing anything sensory to help you be in those spaces, whether that's like you wear your earbuds and you play music over people, or you have an app on your phone that you're really into that can take your mind off of what's going on. I think using tools can be very helpful too.
I love that. Making it more gentle, doing the hard things. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, bring a plushie, bring whatever you need. Abby, I feel like we covered quite a few questions today. You think we crushed it?
I think we did. I really love these. And every time we do it, I'm always surprised by how much that we can talk about in these questions, because there is so much to them. So we love to get your questions. We love to respond to them even more. And there's more of these to come. I want to remind you all that, like Gabby said, we're pre-recording these and we will be off for 1 week after this, giving ourselves some moments of rest and restoration. But we've got some pretty cool things planned, including a guest speaker. Gabby, this is a great episode, wrapping things up, and we've got some really cool things to look forward to.
We have a lot on the horizon. I'm going to be starting a new job at the beginning of June. Ooh. Abby's got graduation on the horizon. So like Abby said, we're taking some time to ourselves. We're going to be doing some R&R, some rest and recovery, because we can't do this podcast without filling up our own cups. So if you have questions, if you have feedback, if you want to reach out to us, we'll still be active on social media. We're still posting episodes. You can email us at firesidesnack@gmail.com. Catch us at YouTube, Spotify, Instagram. We're there. Till next time, guys.
Till next time.
Fireside Snack is hosted by Abby Dinges and Gabby Buckner. Editing, music, and artwork by Gabby Buckner. Please email us at firesidesnack@gmail.com with your recovery questions and be on the lookout for weekly episodes. Thank you for joining us for Fireside Snack and for filling our cups up with gratitude. Enjoy your week.